Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage on a snowy Sunday afternoon, and I'm doing what I pretty much always do, working on a transmission. I had several conversations this week and every week looking back as far as I can remember, going over the finer details of owning and operating, in this case, a Turbo 400 transmission. From the time you have it in your possession to the point you're going to road test it and beyond, there's quite a bit of things you should probably know. It's apparently not common knowledge, and believe it or not, with 108 Turbo 400 themed videos so far on my YouTube channel in my playlist, I've never done one that says how to operate your Turbo 400 transmission. And a lot of what I'm going to say will carry over into other transmissions and life in general, but today we're going to focus on that. At least that's what the thumbnail is going to say. It's funny, I recently did a video on how to operate your Lenko racing transmission, but it wasn't until just a few days ago when it occurred to me that I should probably get that one done. That's been on the list for a while. So where do we start? Well, I've done videos on, a recipe like for 800 to 1,000 horsepower and given lots of other information on how to purchase one. Recently I did one on pricing and how to purchase a racing transmission or even a street performance transmission. So that information's out there. But now you have just picked it up from the builder. What happens next? We'll call this the owning and operating. This is the owning portion. So you have to make sure, and where do we even start? The common problems that people get tied up in is one, proper fluid level. And even that's jumping ahead, but let's just start there. You have to make sure your dipstick is correctly calibrated, and in the Turbo 400, that is, the full mark should be even with the pan rail. And if it's slightly higher than that, that's okay too. A lot better than being lower than that. And you have to know right off the bat, if you have a new torque converter and a new transmission, you're talking 8 to 10 quarts of oil. So if you dumped in, I read an article or a post the other night, the guy said, I filled the transmission, I started it up and it doesn't work. You can't fill it without starting it and running it and continuing to fill it. You can put in 4 or 5 quarts. Much more than that, it's just going to run out the vent. And you have to start it, let it idle and circulate, and continue to fill it. Put it in out of gear, continue to check the oil, give it an easy road test, and continue to check the oil till it is even on both sides. A lot of times it will read something on one side and something else on the other side of the dipstick when you flip it over. So you watch somebody checking the oil that knows what they're doing, they're going to look at both sides of the dipstick and not believe it until they both read the same. All the air bubbles and everything's calmed down and it's actually at its true level, idling in park. That's proper fluid level. But again, I jumped ahead. First, we have to install it in the car. Things you're responsible for: proper mounting to the back of the engine, having the right length bolts, having the proper gear that you need. If you need a flex plate shield, a transmission shield, proper torque converter pullout to your flex plate. I've done many videos on the hub pilot, depending on what you have for an engine, be it a traditional Chevy or an LS style engine. There's a lot of information that can easily make your transmission self-destruct if you miss any one of these details. Your shifter needs to be in perfect adjustment. I like to adjust them in neutral. A lot of the shifter manufacturers will tell you how they want it adjusted. But for the most part, if you adjust it in neutral, so the pin slides in and out, and then you can check it both directions toward park and toward the other end of the spectrum, be it first or third gear, depending on whether you have a forward or reverse valve body. You want, in each position, the pin that's in the end of the cable, or an actual clevis pin, whatever connects the cable or whatever you have for linkage to the arm on the side of the transmission, it should be free. You don't want to have strain on it because it probably won't go into gear properly. It's going to fight the rooster comb. It should just pop into each one and never be under any strain. So that's important and often overlooked. You need a mount, in my opinion. If you have the factory rubber motor mounts, you should have a rubber transmission mount. If you have poly engine mounts, you should have a poly transmission mount. If you have motor plates or solid mounts, you should have a poly transmission mount. I want some cushion back there. Otherwise, the bell housing just ahead of the pump where you cut it off anyway, it's going to cut itself off. I see that a lot. You need to have the proper slip yoke. It needs to be able to go all the way into the transmission and be pulled back out and be sticking 3/4 to an inch out of the transmission with the vehicle at ride height, suspension loaded. That's important. The drive shaft should be built to withstand some power. If you have a small drive shaft or a weak drive shaft, inadequate with small U-joints, when it explodes, your transmission's right behind it. It is junk. You'll have to take it apart and fix it. Not an area you should cheap out on. And if you watch my videos, that drive shaft should be contained. If there's any type of performance vehicle, at a minimum, one drive shaft loop. If you're pushing 800,000 horsepower and you're going fast, that drive shaft should be contained. Look it up, drive shaft containment. You need it, even if you don't know it. Most people don't know what they need. They don't have a clue. And they watch the big influencers, if you will. No offense to the ones that do it right. But if you have 1 million followers and you're showing people how to do it wrong, if drag racing became your thing and you don't really know much about drag racing and you're going really fast without gloves and without even a drive shaft loop, or you don't know how to operate the transmission, if you neutral it and shut the engine off. Here's an average instruction sheet from a trans brake valve body. In bold letters, excellent information. Do not neutral this or any 3-speed transmission. They will explode. Big letters right there. Words to live by. Never put that transmission in neutral when you're at speed. If you have clean neutral, it's a thing, but it's a kind of a, it requires some study whether your clean neutral is safe or not. Some call them safe neutrals. The engine still has to be running for that to work. You cannot reach up and shut the engine off and not expect the transmission to jump through the floor. I see this all the time. I was just watching a video this morning from racing that was happening yesterday with a very popular YouTuber or his acquaintance driving a Camaro running 440 in the 8th mile, 150, end of every pass, shut it, neutral it, and shut it off. I'm sure it has a good transmission, hopefully with an SFI case, and when it finally explodes, it'll at least be contained, we hope. But I don't know what's under there. As a general rule, don't do it. So I guess now we're moved on to the driving portion. You've heard it 1,000 times. You know, you're going to hurt the sprag in a Turbo 400 or the low roller clutch. Now, on the back of the direct drum, you have one or the other. You either have a low roller, you either have a roller clutch, there's a low roller in the back, and that can get damaged as well. But on the back of the direct drum is your intermediate sprag or intermediate roller, depending on the style you have. Hopefully you have at least a 34 element sprag that you can still do damage to in the burnout or anytime the tires are spinning. And the simplest answer as to why that is a weak point, under normal load, when the transmission shifts, you hear the engine pull down 700-800 RPMs or more, depending on your combo. That slowdown allows the sprag or the roller clutch to do its job. Without that, when the tires are spinning or when you're doing a burnout in the water box, specifically first or second gear, that is when the damage happens. It's freewheeling. There's no load on it. And that is how it gets damaged. So avoid that situation and you probably won't hurt it. But that is a weak link. And that's not necessarily just the Turbo 400, but that's what we're talking about today. And I guess I've hit a lot of this in no particular order, but it is what it is. The information is going to be mostly here, and I'm sure when I'm finished I'll remember something I should have said, but fluid. How often to change it and what type of fluid. The type of fluid is less important than keeping it clean and changing it. On the same token, when your transmission was picked up, you took it in your possession, it just got rebuilt and it's clean inside. If it gets debris in it from the cooler system or the converter, that's on you. Don't let it happen. There's flush available you can flush your lines out with. The converter itself, if you know anybody that has a torque converter flushing machine besides me, I'm the only one I know that has one. But I'm sure somebody else does. Or have your torque converter rebuilt. You can't drain the debris out of it. It can't be done. The way it's made, there'll always be fluid left in it and debris. So if you're picking up your brand new rebuilt transmission and you put an old converter in it, you just contaminated it. Will you get away with it? Maybe. Does it happen? Yep. Is it going to void your warranty? If there is one, racing stuff, probably no warranty. If your builder's a good guy, he's probably going to help you out either way. But as long as you don't come at him with a bunch of accusations, he's going to be your friend. So back to the oil. I don't like Type F. I don't like the smell of it. I lived through the era of Type F when it was on its way out, of how it would turn to brown varnish. The smell, I can still smell it. And when you drop the pan because somebody wanted the oil change because it was brown, as soon as the air hit it and you put fresh fluid in it, it would no longer, the vehicle wouldn't even move. How do you explain that? They drove it in, wanted a fluid change, and now you need a transmission. They think you're lying to them. I don't like Type F. A lot of transmission places tell you to use it. They sell you a concoction of half Type F, half Dextron, whatever. If you use it, fine. I don't like it. I like just a good old Dextron 3. Dextron 6, I guess, is semi-synthetic. Probably okay. I'm not big on synthetics for racing because it's more slippery, right? And I don't want things to slip. But I'm sure it will work fine if you have enough hydraulic pressure and clamping force. It's not going to care what you have for oil as long as it's there to do the clamping. So we've covered that in many videos. A lot of your longevity isn't in the style clutch you chose to have put in your transmission. It's in the hydraulic pressure, proper assembly, and the ability to squeeze those clutches so they don't slip. So it's that simple. So proper quantity of oil and quality of oil is important. So how often to change it? Depending on the type of abuse you're going to give it. If you have a turbo car where you got to sit on the brake for 30 seconds or more to get the thing to build boost, you probably got to change oil every race day. Maybe at least every weekend, at least as often as when you change the motor oil. The transmission tends to get forgotten, and the poor rear end might get serviced once a year, but they both see a lot of abuse. Oil's, well, I would say oil's cheap, but it's not really anymore, but still cheaper than buying hard parts. So I guess that's all I got to say about that. This video is probably getting long. It was kind of kooky. I didn't, as usual, have any notes. I'm just winging it. Maybe one of these days I'll actually script it, but that wouldn't be any fun. I'm just me being me. And if you listen to it, great. If not, I don't blame you. Have a great day. Bye.